In the 1970s, a British fridge often outlived the mortgage. Decades of cool, silent service. Any part was easily swapped, and every fault was fixable. Yet today, most new fridges in UK homes are quietly rigged for failure long before their 5th birthday. Each breakdown is no accident, and when it comes, you are pushed to replace, not repair. How did the heart of the British kitchen become so disposable, and who decided you should not be allowed to fix it? The answers upend everything you thought you knew about your home, your rights, and the appliance industry. Steel doors that clanged shut, enameled shelves built to hold the weight of a Christmas ham, and a compressor that sounded like it could outlast the house itself. This was the British fridge of the 1970s. Inside many homes, these machines were more than just appliances. They were permanent fixtures, bought with the expectation they would see children grow up and mortgages paid off. 5-year warranties came as standard, but few owners ever needed to use them. The real measure of a fridge's worth was not its guarantee, but the quiet confidence that it might run for 30 or even 50 years without complaint. Dorian McGrain, a repair engineer who began his rounds in the late 70s, remembers the era well. He describes opening the back of an old Electrolux or Frigidaire to find a single-stage compressor and a simple thermostat. If a gasket wore out, you could pick up a replacement at the local hardware shop. Service manuals were published for the public, not just for factory-trained technicians. The parts inside were robust, interchangeable, and designed to be swapped out on a kitchen table with nothing more than a screwdriver and a bit of patience. Repairs became part of the domestic routine. A broken shelf or a rattling fan did not spell disaster. It was an excuse to fetch the manual and get stuck in. Neighbors traded tips, and the local repairman was a familiar face, not a last resort. The culture around these fridges reflected a different attitude to ownership, one where longevity was expected and waste was frowned upon. For a generation, the British kitchen stood as proof that good design was something you could rely on for decades. Inside the shell of a modern fridge, the heart of the machine is no longer a sturdy, piston-driven compressor. Instead, most new models rely on a linear compressor, a sleek, electronically controlled unit that promises energy savings and quiet running. But beneath the marketing, the design brings a hidden vulnerability. The linear compressor depends on an ultra-fine layer of oil to keep its moving parts from grinding together. Over time, tiny metal shavings shed by the piston or cylinder begin to circulate inside the sealed system. These fragments are almost invisible, but they wreak havoc. They scratch the surfaces, widen the gap meant for lubrication, and break down the oil into sludge. Once the gap grows too wide, the compressor can no longer maintain pressure. Cooling performance drops, then stops altogether. Unlike the old mechanical designs, where a failed part could be swapped out, the contamination in a modern linear system spreads through the entire sealed loop, including compressor, pipes, and evaporator. Replacing just the compressor is rarely enough. The new unit inherits the same contaminated oil and metal debris, setting up a repeat failure. Full system replacement is technically possible, but the cost in parts and labor often exceeds the price of a new fridge. For most households, this means the end of the line. The sealed loop, once a mark of reliability, now locks in the damage. The fridge that looked so advanced on the showroom floor is quietly doomed by a flaw you will never see until the day it stops keeping your milk cold. April Mata's kitchen in South London was supposed to be a showcase of modern convenience. In 2021, she bought a Samsung bespoke fridge, drawn in by the promise of smart features and energy savings. 3 years later, her family found themselves at the mercy of a machine that had begun to outsmart itself. It started with a sensor error. One morning, the fridge's touchscreen declared that the contents of the vegetable drawer were a remote control. The AI system refused to cool properly, convinced that a cauliflower was a household gadget. April contacted the manufacturer, expecting a straightforward fix. Instead, she was told that parts were unavailable and that the issue could not be repaired on site. The only option offered was a costly replacement. Frustrated, April filmed a short video for TikTok, venting that her fridge thought her family was a farm. The clip struck a nerve, racking up 1.2 million views and sparking a national conversation. In April's words, it was wasted money, a fridge that had promised intelligence but delivered only confusion and loss. Independent repairers across the UK now face a new kind of barrier, one set not by skill or tools, but by corporate policy. LG's Smart ThinQ fridges, for example, use encrypted control boards that cannot be diagnosed or replaced by anyone outside the company's authorized network. When a board fails, LG charges £280 for a replacement, but refuses to sell it directly to independent repair shops, citing security concerns. Even those who manage to source a part find it locked down by software, requiring a manufacturer-issued code to function. Bosch has followed a similar path. Its Home Connect models tie the compressor's operation to a cloud-based firmware. Updates or resets are only permitted through authorized service centers. A private firmware update costs £400 and is not available to the public. For many repairers, these tactics have become routine obstacles. In a recent survey of 30 independent UK shops, 87% reported being turned away when trying to order genuine parts for LG and Bosch models. Most say they cannot bypass firmware locks without risking a total system reset. That move often leaves the fridge permanently disabled. The result is a repair ecosystem where expertise counts for less than access, and where the decision to fix or replace is quietly taken out of the hands of both technician and owner. UK's Right to Repair rules, announced with fanfare in 2021, promised to put power back in the hands of consumers. The Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy set out regulations requiring manufacturers to supply spare parts for up to 10 years after a fridge's launch. On paper, this sounds like a major win for households hoping to keep their appliances running beyond the warranty. But the reality is far less generous. The 10-year window begins the moment a model is released, not when it is bought. So by the time a fridge is 3 or 4 years old, that clock is already ticking down. Even then, many of the most important parts, like compressors or circuit boards, are only available to professional repairers, not to the public. Manuals and technical documents are often restricted, locking out DIY fixes and community repair groups. For smart fridges, the law allows manufacturers to keep firmware and diagnostic software under wraps for up to 5 years, citing security as a reason. This means a fridge with a software fault may be unfixable unless the maker agrees to help. The result is a system that promises repair, but delivers it only on the manufacturer's terms, leaving most owners with few real options when something goes wrong. Whirlpool's tumble dryer fires forced the United Kingdom safety watchdog into action. Between 2015 and 2018, more than 1,500 incidents were linked to a faulty thermal cutout sensor. Internal warnings went unheeded until the Office for Product Safety and Standards stepped in. By 2018, the Office for Product Safety and Standards had ordered a mandatory recall and a £12 million compensation scheme for affected households. Whirlpool's voluntary repair offer was deemed insufficient. Regulators demanded a full recall, not a quick fix. This intervention demonstrated that, when risk to the public is clear and documented, United Kingdom authorities can compel manufacturers to act decisively, even against their commercial interests. Every year, more than 137,000 tons of fridges and freezers leave British homes, destined for a patchwork of recycling centres, scrap yards, and export depots. Official figures show that only about 38% of this mountain is fully recycled on UK soil. The rest is either burned for energy or shipped abroad, sometimes to places like Agbogbloshie in Ghana, where old appliances are stripped by hand and toxic fumes hang over the site. The share of exported smart fridge electronics has more than doubled in 7 years, now reaching 27%. These numbers mask a deeper cost, not just wasted steel and plastic, but the silent export of pollution and risk, far from the kitchens where the problem began. A repair quote above £250 is where most households draw the line. At that point, replacement feels like the only sensible option. The Consumer Rights Act promises 6 years of reasonable durability, but in practice, few people pursue a claim. For many, the maths is simple. Why fight for a repair when a new fridge is only a phone call away? Each quick swap chips away at savings and piles up waste, but the system makes it the path of least resistance. Every year, over 160,000 tons of fridges are scrapped in the UK, most far too soon. As repair becomes a privilege, not a right, household budgets and the environment pay the price. How long will we accept disposability as standard? Share your thoughts below.